Good evening, everyone. Hey guys, tonight we step onto the shore of the ancient Mediterranean, where the air smells of salt and tar, and the cries of gulls mix with the creak of wooden masts. The sea rolls in dark waves, and far beyond the horizon something gleams faintly, a light unlike any other, a promise carved in stone and flame. You walk closer, eyes straining, and there it is, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, rising like a stairway for the gods, its beacon daring sailors to dream. It looks magnificent from here, though, let's be honest. If you were actually rowing a fragile wooden boat toward this coast at night, you probably wouldn't survive the seasickness, let alone the surf. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time so we can see who else is listening across the oceans of night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the quay, sandals crunching against shells and sand, gazing up at the tower's white limestone walls glowing in the dusk. The lighthouse rises tier by tier, square base, octagonal midsection, circular crown. At the top, a fire blazes, its glow magnified by polished bronze mirrors that scatter the light far across the sea. Neutral voice steps in. Historians agree the Lighthouse of Alexandria, built around the 3rd century BCE under Ptolemy II, stood roughly 100 to 120 meters tall, making it one of the tallest man-made structures of the ancient world. That's the fact, stone stacked higher than imagination, holding a fire against the sky. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some medieval travelers swore the lighthouse's mirrors could set enemy ships ablaze miles away. More likely, the mirrors just helped project light, but the image of ancient pyromaniac optics is too delicious to resist. Somewhere, an ancient engineer probably sighed, "It's just physics, not a death ray." But good luck convincing sailors with wild imaginations. You walk closer, neck craned until it aches, and the tower looms above you like a second sun. Its walls glow pale against the darkening sky, the fire's flicker bouncing across polished stone. A soft breeze carries the smell of burning wood and resin, sharp and smoky. The beacon feels alive, like a heartbeat for the harbor. Historians still argue whether the light could truly be seen more than 30 miles out at sea, or whether that's just legend. You squint, imagining yourself a sailor far offshore, heart leaping when a tiny flame appears against the void. For you, it's reassurance. For the builders, it's glory carved into stone. Dock workers bustle around you, ropes slapping wood, sailors calling in Greek and Egyptian tongues, merchants balancing baskets of grain and amphorae of wine. Someone cracks a joke about the lighthouse being so tall it can peek into Zeus's backyard. The laughter is quick because even hard laborers can't help but feel awe under its glow. You linger at the base, tracing the limestone blocks fitted so tightly that your fingernail can't slip between them. The tower doesn't just stand, it commands. You realize you are staring not just at stone, but at ambition fossilized into architecture. A civilization decided the sea would not be chaos, it would be guided, lit, and ruled. The night deepens, the fire burns hotter, and the lighthouse throws its light across the water, steady and sure. You breathe slowly, letting the glow ease into your chest, a reminder that even in ancient times, people built beacons not just to guide ships, but to soothe fear. You close your eyes, and the hum of waves feels almost like the lighthouse whispering, "Safe harbor lies ahead." You wander inland, the tower's light still pulsing faintly at your back, and the city rises around you like a vision set down by gods with very specific blueprints. Streets stretch in perfect grids, wide enough for chariots to roll side by side. Colonnades catch the early glow of dawn, marble pillars pale as bone. You breathe in air filled with incense, sea brine, and something faintly fried that makes your stomach growl. It seems street food has always been civilization's finest invention. Neutral voice drops in with a clear anchor. Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, though he never lived to see it completed. After his death, his general Ptolemy I claimed Egypt and made the city his capital. By the reign of Ptolemy II, Alexandria had become the beating heart of a new dynasty. You step onto the Canopic Way, the grand avenue that cuts through the city, lined with statues and bustling with people. Merchants shout prices for grain, papyrus, and fish, hauled fresh from the Mediterranean. Philosophers argue under shaded porticos, their voices carrying like gossip carried by the sea breeze. A donkey brays loudly as if to join the debate, and for a moment you wonder if the animal's argument might be the most convincing. A fact glimmers in the crowd. Alexandria grew to become one of the largest cities in the ancient world, rivaling even Rome at its height. Its port, its lighthouse, and its legendary library made it a hub of trade, knowledge, and power. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some later stories claim that Alexander's body itself was brought back here, entombed in a golden sarcophagus and displayed for centuries. Imagine walking into town to buy figs and passing by the eternal nap of one of history's most famous conquerors. That's one way to keep civic pride strong. You stroll past the marketplace into neighborhoods where Greek temples stand alongside Egyptian shrines. Priests in linen robes tend to incense burners while children chase each other around colonnades. The city hums with cultural fusion. Greek order meets Egyptian tradition, stitched together with the threads of ambition. Historians still argue whether Alexandria was more Greek than Egyptian in spirit, or whether it truly blended into something new. Was it a Greek city planted in foreign soil, or a hybrid heart of the Mediterranean world? You glance around at the languages, the art, the music spilling from courtyards, and the answer feels both and neither. As you walk, the din grows louder. Ships dock at the great harbor, unloading amphorae of wine, barrels of olives, crates of glassware. Traders haggle over ivory and exotic animals brought from Africa. A parrot squawks loudly, startling a sailor so badly he drops a crate. The parrot cackles, clearly pleased with its mischief. You pause at the edge of a plaza where a marble fountain splashes, water sparkling in sunlight. Families gather, cooling themselves, laughing as children dip their feet. The sound of the city is alive, sandals scuffing stone, carts squeaking, women singing lullabies in Greek and Demotic. You feel both the energy of a newborn city and the weight of its destined greatness. From here, the lighthouse's glow still lingers in the distance, a promise stitched to the horizon. You sense how the city and its beacon grew together, one guiding ships to safety, the other guiding ideas across the world. You leave the humming streets behind, following a long stretch of stone that juts into the sea. The sun glitters across waves, gulls circle overhead, and the salty wind whips your hair back like it has strong opinions about your style. Ahead lies a narrow causeway called the Heptastadion, its name meaning 7 stadia, because, fun fact, Greeks measured everything by how fast a decent runner could pass out from exhaustion. Neutral voice steadies the picture. The Heptastadion was a massive causeway nearly a mile long, connecting the mainland city of Alexandria to a small rocky island called Pharos. It created 2 harbors, the Great Harbor to the east and the Ionostos Harbor to the west, making Alexandria a maritime powerhouse. You walk along the stone path, waves slapping at its sides, fishermen perched with nets ready, their lines dipping into the froth. Behind you, Alexandria sprawls like a gleaming mosaic. Ahead, the island of Pharos rises, rugged, craggy, and, until recently, a lonely rock battered by sea and storm. You can almost hear the island muttering, "I was minding my own business," and then, suddenly, bam! World wonder. A solid fact. Pharos was chosen as the site for the Great Lighthouse because it marked the dangerous shoals and rocks at Alexandria's harbor entrance. Ships needed guidance through the treacherous approach, and the island provided the perfect stage for a beacon of unprecedented scale. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient writers claimed the name Pharos itself became the root of the word lighthouse in many languages. Even today, the French word for lighthouse is phare. Talk about brand recognition lasting millennia. Nike could only dream. You reach the far end of the causeway, your sandals crunching over sea-slick stone. Waves roar below, slapping against jagged rocks that would shred any unlucky ship's hull. You imagine being a sailor steering into these waters at night, the coast invisible, the wind howling, your cargo sloshing nervously. No wonder kings wanted a light here. Better to pay masons now than explain to investors later why their ship is decorating the seabed. Historians still argue whether the heptastadion was purely practical, built to connect Pharos with the mainland, or whether it also symbolized dominion, a ribbon of stone claiming the sea as part of the city. Was it an engineering solution or a statement piece? Perhaps both, a bridge that shouted, "We own this harbor, thank you very much." You climb onto the rocks of Pharos itself. The ground is uneven, salted with spray, dotted with seaweed that makes each step treacherous. Fishermen wave, their catches glinting silver in the sun. A child scampers past, chasing crabs with a stick and nearly tumbling into a tide pool. You grin, reminded that even in the shadow of history, kids will always find new ways to terrify their parents. From here, the lighthouse's foundation spreads out like a fortress under construction. Huge limestone blocks lie stacked in neat rows, waiting for hands to raise them into glory. You can hear the clatter of chisels, the bark of foremen, the grunt of oxen pulling sledges. The air buzzes with the smell of tar, sweat, and ambition. Pharos will never again be just a rocky outpost. It is destined to hold the beacon of the world. You pause at the water's edge, watching waves crash against the base of the new foundation. Foam sprays your face, cool and sharp. The sea tests the stones with each surge, but the blocks remain steady, like stubborn teeth biting into the shoreline. You sense the weight of what will rise here, not just a tower, but a promise carved against chaos. The island whispers underfoot, and you walk forward, heart thrumming with the anticipation of what's about to be built. You stand on the rocky island as the air fills with shouts and hammering. Dust swirls in sunlight, ropes creak under strain, and scaffolding climbs like a wooden skeleton over the limestone base. At the center of the chaos is a man in fine robes, his hair swept back by the sea breeze, gesturing with a mixture of elegance and impatience. This is Sostratus of Cnidus, the architect whose name will be whispered through ages whenever the lighthouse is remembered. Neutral voice steps in. Sostratus, a Greek architect, is credited by ancient sources with designing the Lighthouse of Alexandria, though some argue he worked under the patronage of Ptolemy II. Inscriptions once honored both king and builder, a polite reminder that credit-sharing politics is at least as old as stonework. You watch him sketch designs on a wax tablet, lines crisp, angles exact. The tower will rise in 3 stages: square base, octagonal middle, circular crown. It's less a building and more a staircase for the sky, each tier narrowing like a ladder toward heaven. He frowns at the drawing, mutters something about proportions, and scratches over a line. Even geniuses have bad sketch days. A firm fact: ancient accounts agree the lighthouse stood about 100 to 120 meters tall, second only to the pyramids in height at the time. It wasn't just a building, it was an announcement carved into the skyline, declaring Alexandria's supremacy. Here's a quirky tidbit. One later story claims that Sostratus secretly carved his own name into the foundation, covering it with plaster and an inscription honoring the king. As centuries passed, the plaster wore away, leaving only the architect's name visible. It's basically the ancient version of graffiti tagging, except classier and less likely to be found by City Hall. You circle the site, watching teams haul limestone blocks on sledges greased with oil, shouting in rhythm as they push. Oxen strain at ropes, muscles rippling, hooves slipping on stone. Foremen crack jokes to keep morale up, comparing the workers' effort to wrestling Poseidon himself. A groan rises from the crew, but the block shifts into place, thudding with finality. Historians still argue whether the lighthouse was more practical than symbolic. Was it first a safety measure for sailors, or a colossal advertisement of Ptolemaic power? You glance up at the scaffolding already climbing skyward, and the answer feels like both. Safety earns loyalty, and loyalty keeps trade flowing into the king's coffers. Sostratus gestures again, this time toward a model built in miniature, 3 tiers stacked like a wedding cake, topped with a great statue of Zeus or Poseidon holding a staff. Children gawk at it, imagining gods standing guard above the harbor. One boy whispers, "What if it's actually me up there?" His friends laugh, and you chuckle too. Even in the shadow of greatness, kids still dream of starring roles. Workers roll copper sheets toward the site, their surfaces gleaming in the sun. You hear talk of mirrors, bronze polished to perfection, ready to catch firelight and hurl it across the sea. One mason cracks that if they angled it right, maybe they could spy on rival kingdoms shaving. The others howl with laughter before returning to the grind. The design begins to take shape around you. The square base rises, thick and solid like a fortress. It feels immovable, a statement that the tower will outlast storms and centuries. Higher up, scaffolds stretch toward the sky, and from the half-built octagon, you can see the sweep of the great harbor glistening in the sun. Sailors glance up from their ships pointing, shading their eyes, muttering awe at the sight. You wander back to Sostratus, who is scratching fresh notes into wax. He pauses, sighs, and stares out at the sea as if measuring not just stones, but the horizon itself. You wonder if he knows this tower will stand as one of the 7 wonders of the world, or if he's simply hoping it doesn't collapse during the next storm. The sun drops lower, scaffolding shadows stretching long across the island. Workers rest against stone blocks, sipping from gourds, joking about whose muscles are most sore. The architect rolls up his plans, satisfied, for now. The skeleton of the lighthouse already looms above the island, promising more than just guidance. It promises legacy. You return at dawn, the air damp with sea spray, and the sound of hammers already ringing like a chorus of steel birds. The lighthouse has climbed higher since you last stood here. The square base now rises like a fortress, solid and severe, its walls of limestone blocks glinting pale gold in the morning light. Workers swarm across scaffolding, hauling baskets of rubble, ropes creaking as pulleys lift stones upward inch by inch. The whole island hums like a beehive made of sweat and ambition. Neutral voice lays the foundation with certainty. Ancient sources describe the Lighthouse of Alexandria as 3 tiers, a square base, an octagonal middle, and a cylindrical tower crowned with a statue. The combined structure reached between 100 and 120 meters, making it one of the tallest human-made constructions of the ancient world. You walk among laborers mixing mortar, the scent of lime sharp in your nostrils. A mason leans on his chisel and quips that if he lays one more block, he'll start dreaming in rectangles. His partner replies that rectangles pay better than circles, which earns a weary laugh. Even here, sarcasm survives the centuries. The square base towers over you now, its walls thick enough to swallow catapults, its corners aligned like a chessboard anchored in stone. Ramps slope upward, guiding oxen as they drag sledges stacked with new blocks. Each thud as a stone settles feels like a drumbeat declaring the tower's steady rise. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some ancient travelers claimed the lighthouse's stones were bound not just with mortar, but with molten lead poured between blocks to resist waves and earthquakes. Whether true or not, the idea makes you picture masons casually ladling lava between stones like they're making ancient lasagna. You climb a temporary staircase, the wood creaking underfoot, and reach the octagonal middle section under construction. From here, the view spreads wide, the great harbor bustling with ships, the city shining with whitewashed walls, the Heptastadion causeway stretching like a ribbon toward the mainland. Sailors glance up, shading their eyes, murmuring as if the tower's already guiding them, even unfinished. Historians still argue whether the exact dimensions of each tier match the grand descriptions of later writers. Were the proportions precise, or did imagination inflate the scale? You look down at the sheer bulk of the base and suspect the truth is plenty impressive without embellishment. Higher up, the circular top tier is beginning to take shape, its wooden scaffolds lashed tightly, planks groaning under the weight of workers carrying stones. Voices call down measurements, ropes strain, dust drifts in lazy clouds. You wipe grit from your eyes, laughing as a foreman shouts that if the gods wanted the tower finished sooner, they could send a few giants to help. The crew howls and gets back to work. The structure looks less like a pile of blocks now, and more like a living thing. Bones at the bottom, ribs in the middle, a spine stretching upward. Every strike of the hammer is a heartbeat, every grunt of effort a breath. At midday, workers pause to eat flatbread and dried fish. A boy scrambles up the scaffolding carrying a water jug, tripping halfway and catching himself with wild flailing that makes the crew roar. He bows dramatically, soaking wet, and mutters something about hazard pay that hasn't been invented yet. By afternoon, the tower's silhouette casts a long shadow over the sea. Ships glide toward harbor, and already the lighthouse seems to shepherd them, though its beacon is not yet lit. The air hums with the knowledge that soon the top will crown the structure with fire, mirrors, and gods watching from above. You step back onto the rocky ground, craning your neck until it aches. The lighthouse rises tier by tier, each section narrower, more elegant, like a staircase climbing to the heavens. Even half-built, it dominates the skyline, announcing to every sailor within sight, "This city is power, this harbor is safe, this beacon will outlast you all." You climb the scaffolding slowly, the planks creaking and swaying with each gust of wind off the sea. The higher you go, the more Alexandria shrinks beneath you, its colonnades turning into neat toy blocks and its bustling markets dissolving into a haze of voices. At last, you reach the circular crown of the lighthouse, where the true magic happens. Neutral voice offers the solid anchor. Ancient descriptions tell us the Lighthouse of Alexandria held a great open chamber at the top, where a fire burned through the night, its glow amplified by polished bronze mirrors to guide ships safely to harbor. This combination of flame and reflection made it the most advanced beacon of its age. You step into the chamber, eyes widening as you see workers stoking a pile of wood and resin. The flames roar, bright orange tongues lashing upward, smoke billowing through vents cut into the dome. The heat slaps your face immediately, and you stumble back, laughing nervously. Someone shouts above the din, "Don't stand too close unless you like your eyebrows extra crispy." The workers chuckle. You retreat another step. A bronze mirror taller than you leans against the wall, its surface polished so perfectly that it throws sunlight like a blade across the chamber. When angled toward the fire, the glow bounces outward, stretching into the horizon. Sailors far offshore swear they can see the flame dancing on the sea itself, as though the gods are leaving breadcrumbs across the waves. Here's the quirky tidbit. Later, legends claimed those mirrors could act as weapons, focusing sunlight to set enemy ships ablaze. In truth, the physics don't quite hold at such distances, but the rumor stuck. Admit it, part of you enjoys imagining ancient engineers cackling, "Just tilt it a little more," boom, instant barbecue navy. You walk a narrow ledge around the chamber, gripping the railing tight as the wind tugs at your tunic. From here, the entire Mediterranean feels like it stretches beneath your toes. Ships look like beetles crawling across blue glass, their sails snapping white against the horizon. One sailor spots the fire above you and waves wildly. You wave back, knowing he can't see you, only the comfort of the flame. Historians still argue whether the lighthouse burned wood, resin, or oil, and how often supplies had to be carried up to keep the beacon alive. Imagine being assigned the job of hauling firewood up a 100-meter tower every day. You'd have the calves of a demigod by the end of the week. The chamber rattles with activity. Firekeepers shouting, workers polishing mirrors, apprentices measuring angles. A boy clumsily drops a bucket, sending water splashing across the floor. The others groan, muttering about slippery surfaces, but someone jokes. At least the lighthouse won't catch fire. The laughter, thin and tired, lightens the mood for a moment. The wind howls louder outside, rattling the scaffolds, making the whole crown sway ever so slightly. You step closer to the fire, not for warmth, but for reassurance. The beacon blazes steady despite the storm. Its light pours outward, constant, unblinking, as if daring the sea to try anything foolish. You peer down the spiral stairwell that plunges through the tower, imagining workers trudging upward with fuel, sailors glancing upward with hope, rulers standing in the harbor below with pride. The lighthouse is more than stone and fire. It's a chain binding land and sea, man and God, ambition and survival. The night descends quickly, stars winking into place one by one. The flame glows brighter, reflected in the mirror, flung across the water like a second moon. Out there, somewhere in the dark, sailors lift their heads and breathe easier. You watch the light stretch endlessly, and you realize this is not just guidance, it's comfort, carved into fire and bronze. By the time you spiral back down through the stone throat of the tower, the sea has slipped from ink to pewter to bright hammered silver. You step out into wind and salt and bell calls, and the harbor spreads before you like an opened atlas. The lighthouse breathes behind you, flames settling for daytime duty, and the city's maritime heart begins its measured thump. Ropes slap masts, gulls scold fishermen, and somewhere a coppersmith wakes the morning with delicate violence. You walk the quay where wet planks shine and barnacles write their own gritty poetry. Neutral voice lays a firm plank under your feet. Alexandria operated two great basins divided by the Heptastadion, the great harbor to the east, where the lighthouse stands guard, and the western Eunostos harbor, both crowded with ships from across the Mediterranean. That's the plain fact. Twin lungs pulling in trade and breathing out empire. Sails bloom like a field of cloth. From the north, grain carriers wallow in slow and sure, their hulls fat with Egyptian wheat. From the west, merchantmen roll in with amphorae of wine, oil, and talkative sailors who all claim the same single best sea shanty. From the south and east, cargoes arrive that smell of far places, frankincense, cinnamon, pepper, goods that cross the Red Sea and the Nile's veins to reach this mouth of the world. The air is a stew of tar, citrus, fish, and ambition. It's not exactly a perfume you'd bottle, but it is what success smells like. If your cologne line is Ode to Prosperity, maybe tone down the sardine notes. Dock officials wait with wax tablets and long memories. A clerk taps his stylus, eyes your sandals, and immediately calculates tariff rates that would make a mathematician blush. Another pats a cat whose expression suggests it runs the pier and merely tolerates human staff. You watch cargo lists grow longer and respect for ancient bureaucracy grow deeper. If paperwork is an endurance sport, these people have the gold medal. You wander to a slip where pilots disembark, a lean, sunburned crew with eyes that read waves the way librarians read spines. They nod toward the tower with the casual respect you give a friend who has saved your life 3 times already. A pilot flips a shell in his hand and says, not boasting, that the beacon and the shoals know each other by first name. You believe him. A stable fact rides the swell. Under Ptolemaic and later Roman rule, Alexandria became a primary grain port for the Mediterranean, especially vital to Rome's food supply. When these holds are full, cities eat. When storms scatter them, cities grow anxious. You can feel the politics of bread humming under every creak of timber. A boy rushes past with a basket of dried dates, trailing 3 gulls who behave like unpaid security. A sailor tries to buy 2 figs and a rumor for the same price. The vendor keeps the figs and gives him the rumor. The lighthouse's mirrors, the man says, can signal messages by day as flashes on the sea. You grin at the thought of Pharos reinventing the world's first group chat, minus the emojis. Here's the quirky tidbit. Later, storytellers swore a bronze figure atop the tower, sometimes a trumpeter, sometimes a sea god, would whistle when winds shifted, warning of storms before clouds knew what they were doing. It's charming meteorology, half weather vane, half gossip. Whether the statue sang or not, sailors swear the tower felt like a living barometer. You step along the quay, where stevedores chain themselves to rhythm. 2 sing a call and response in Greek, and on each, hey, a crate rises in a tidy arc. 1 trips, catches himself, bows to applause, then blames the plank for slander. Laughter breaks like foam, brief and bright, and the work moves again. Even in labor, there is showmanship. Even in showmanship, there is labor. An official escorts you through the customs sheds, rows of amphorae stamped with seals, bundles of papyrus, baskets of glass trinkets that cling to sunlight like captured water. At the far end, a perfumer uncorks a jar and the air turns to roses for 3 extravagant seconds before the reality of fish reasserts itself. The contrast makes 2 dockhands sneeze in elegant unison, like a chorus trained by a very picky maestro. Historians still argue whether the harbor operated with formal light signals and prearranged pilotage codes, torches at fixed heights, flags by day, horn calls at night, or whether much of the choreography relied on practiced habit and shouting. The records are fragmentary. The competence is not. Whatever the system, ships slide where they need to go, and palms get greased exactly as often as necessary. You pause near a slip reserved for sleek war galleys, their rams lifted like copper smiles. Guards pace, spears upright, sandals whispering against stone. A commander glances toward the tower, measuring visibility like a tailor measuring a hem. The lighthouse is not only safety, it's strategy. A harbor lit well is a harbor defended well, and the city knows it. Neutral voice folds in another sturdy beam. Through Alexandria's port flowed goods from the Indian Ocean via Red Sea emporia such as Berenike. Caravans and rivercraft stitched those distant markets to the Mediterranean. Here, the stitching tightens into a knot. You watch as Pepper changes hands in the time it takes a boat to rock once and realize the world has just become a little smaller. A pilot points out the channel markers, low, stubborn stones that say, "This way," in a grammar older than the alphabet. You follow them with your eyes and notice how the lighthouse's pale face never blinks. Even in daylight, its presence presses outward, a white exclamation point against blue grammar. A fisherman invites you to taste a sliver of mullet so fresh it practically quotes the sea. You nod approval with the solemnity of a temple inspector, then cough when a bone surprises you and your dignity. The fisherman laughs, claps your shoulder, and assures you that the sea bills all beginners the same way. You accept the tax. At the breakwater, children dangle legs and count ships. They take turns guessing cargoes, grain, glass, spice, ideas, and you applaud the last answer. This harbor does more than move goods, it ferries ways of thinking. A philosopher in a salt-stained cloak debates with a sailor about currents. A healer scans a crate of resins like a sommelier of medicine. A poet stares at ropes as though they're sentences waiting to be untied. The sun climbs, heat spreads, and the harbor's voice changes key. Less clatter, more murmur. A cat stretches on a coil of rope, blinks at you with the unassailable authority of a minor goddess, and goes back to pretending it owns the lighthouse. You salute the deity appropriately. You step onto a pilot boat for a short run out and back, hull slapping the chop, spray painting your cheeks with salt freckles. From the waterline, the quay looks like a stage and the city a theater, all of it framed by that impossible tower. The pilot tips the boat's nose toward the channel, then swings her around. "Always show the light to the bow," he says, "and the city will show mercy to your stern." It is both wisdom and rhyme, which means it's probably true. As you return to the pier, a trader argues the price of pepper with a stamina that could tow a trireme. He gestures skyward. "Do you see that tower? That is how far my patience extends." The buyer looks up, looks down, and raises his offer by a symbolic handful. Somewhere, an accountant smiles without smiling. The day ripens. Sails dry, ropes unkink. The lighthouse sighs smoke and sunlight. Trade tallies pile like small pyramids of ink. Standing near the water's skin, you feel the city's pulse steady and strong, kept in time by a fire over your shoulder and a forest of masts before your eyes. You breathe in salt and ledger dust and think that if order had a smell, it would be this moment, bracing, a little fishy, and full of promise. The beacon behind you does not flare or boast. It merely is, and because it is, ships dare the approach, men dare the bargain, cities dare the dream. You turn once more to the pale height and imagine the night returning, flame rising, mirrors catching, the harbor's two lungs filling again. The day has been a map. The light, a legend written across it. You tuck both into your pocket like a compass made of air. The day slips toward evening, and you find yourself on a shaded terrace above the harbor. A small knot of people gathers, their voices weaving like gulls in a crosswind. Merchants, sailors, philosophers, and curious travelers sip watered wine, each eager to tell you what they saw of the lighthouse. You lean against a column, the stones still warm from the sun, and let their stories roll in like waves. Neutral voice offers the anchor. Ancient writers such as Strabo and Pliny the Elder described the Lighthouse of Alexandria, noting its staggering height and its essential role in guiding ships. Their words, though filtered by time, still echo the awe it inspired. A Greek sailor with weathered skin grins, recounting how the fire seemed to leap across waves on a stormy night, dancing like a god's torch. "It was as if Apollo himself took pity on us," he insists, pounding the table for emphasis. The merchant beside him chuckles, adding that Apollo probably charged docking fees too. The group laughs. You smile into your cup. Another voice rises. A merchant from Rhodes. He claims the mirrors atop the tower caught the sunrise and flashed so brightly that his shipmates thought it was lightning. He swears the gleam reached them before the dawn sky itself, as though the tower outpaced the sun. The others murmur their disbelief, but you admit it's a dramatic mental picture, like the world's first good morning text delivered by stone. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some medieval Arab travelers wrote that the lighthouse contained winding ramps wide enough for horses to climb all the way to the top, carrying firewood for the beacon. Whether true or exaggerated, you picture sweaty horses trudging upward, sighing heavily, muttering, "You've got to be kidding me," in horse language. A philosopher strokes his beard and muses that the lighthouse is not only a tool but a symbol. "It is reason itself," he declares, "a light against the chaos of the sea." He pauses dramatically, then sneezes loudly as dust drifts past, ruining the solemn effect. You try not to laugh, but the table erupts anyway. Historians still argue whether these travelers saw the lighthouse exactly as described, or whether tales grew taller as sailors' memories stretched across oceans. Was it the world's most practical fire pit, or a cosmic spectacle retold with extra sparkle? The truth probably lies somewhere between, glowing steadily while imaginations blazed brighter. From the terrace, the sea glimmers in twilight. Ships return like tired bees, guided unerringly by the flame now rekindled above Pharos. A Nubian trader leans in, describing his first sight of the beacon after weeks upriver. "It was not a tower," he whispers. "It was a promise that I had reached the edge of the known world." His words settle over the group like incense smoke, quiet and reverent. A boy serving wine pauses to listen, his eyes wide. He's never left Alexandria, yet already the lighthouse has carried him to distant seas in his imagination. You see him glance toward the harbor, lips mouthing silent vows to sail one day. You smile, knowing the beacon inspires not only safety but longing. The crowd grows louder again, swapping stories like seashells, each polished differently by memory. One man swears he saw the tower during an eclipse, its flame glowing like a stubborn star. Another insists that from the right angle, the lighthouse appears taller than the pyramids. A woman from Antioch leans back and says simply, "It made me feel small, and I liked it." As the sun melts into the sea, the fire atop Pharos blazes brighter, mirrors catching the last gold of daylight. You sip your wine, listening to voices carry the wonder of the tower into legend. The lighthouse doesn't just guide ships, it guides stories, each one a flicker of flame passed along like an unending torch. Night gathers around the harbor, the fire above Pharos glowing hotter, and the voices you've heard from travelers echo into a softer chorus of legends. You walk closer to the shoreline, listening as sailors lean on crates and swap the kind of stories that stretch truth like a sail in heavy wind. The lighthouse looms behind them, its steady flame giving each tale an almost believable glow. Neutral voice steps in. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, admired by writers for its size and brilliance. But alongside historical accounts, a web of myths and tall tales quickly grew, blurring fact and fantasy. A grizzled sailor taps the side of his nose and insists the mirrors at the top could indeed set enemy ships ablaze from miles away. "I saw it myself," he swears. "A trireme burst into smoke when the light struck it." His shipmates laugh, slapping their knees, one muttering that if that were true, the lighthouse keepers would charge extra for flamethrower service. You grin, enjoying the image of ancient engineers selling deluxe upgrades. Another merchant tells of secret chambers beneath the lighthouse, filled with scrolls, maps, and gold offerings for Poseidon. "Whole treasure rooms," he says, but only opened when the sea itself demanded tribute. The others groan at his flair for drama, but admit that the idea of a hidden library under the beacon sounds tempting. After all, nothing says safe harbor like emergency bedtime reading. Here's the quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab writers claimed a winding staircase inside the lighthouse contained magical inscriptions that glowed in the dark, showing sailors the way. Some even suggested the tower's statue atop the crown could rotate to face the horizon, warning of danger. Whether anyone truly believed it, or whether sailors just liked telling spooky stories to keep apprentices awake, is still up for debate. You stroll farther, pausing by fishermen mending nets. One chuckles and says the lighthouse was built not to guide ships at all, but to guard a buried giant chained beneath the island. "The fire keeps him sleeping," he whispers with a wink. You laugh, shaking your head, but admit the thought of a snoring titan under your feet adds a certain thrill to your evening walk. Historians still argue whether some of these tales stemmed from misinterpretations of the tower's grandeur or from deliberate embellishments to impress audiences far away. Was the lighthouse really a technological marvel mistaken for magic, or did storytellers simply prefer fire-breathing statues to routine engineering? The line between awe and myth has always been easy to blur when the subject is taller than anything else on Earth. Children chase each other along the quay, shouting that the lighthouse can talk, that it whispers the names of ships in the dark. One boy claims his uncle heard it call to him, a voice like thunder saying, "Safe passage." Another interrupts to say it told his uncle to tidy his sandals. You chuckle, suspecting the second version might be truer. The flame atop Pharos crackles, sparks floating into the black sky like new stars. Sailors squint, pointing at the horizon, arguing whether the light can be seen 40 miles out, 50, or maybe all the way to Cyprus if the air's clear enough. Each guess grows taller, and soon they're debating whether the beacon could guide not just ships but birds, clouds, even wandering souls. You lean against a piling, the wood damp and rough, and listen as myth and reality weave together. Some stories stretch too far, some ring with kernels of truth, but all of them prove the same thing. The lighthouse wasn't just a tower. It was a canvas for human imagination, glowing in firelight and rumor alike. The tide laps softly, the stars scatter above, and the colossal beacon burns steadily on. Whether it could ignite fleets, guard buried giants, or whisper secrets hardly matters. What matters is how it made people feel, safe, astonished, and eager to tell the next tale. The night passes, and dawn comes pale and soft. But when you step back onto Pharos, the ground no longer feels steady. A tremor rolls under your feet, faint at first, like a drumbeat muffled in earth. Birds erupt from the scaffolding, wings flashing white in the sun. The fire at the tower's crown flickers but does not fail. You steady yourself on a stone block, heart thumping as the earth exhales a warning. Neutral Voice offers the plain truth. The Lighthouse of Alexandria endured several earthquakes over the centuries. Records tell of tremors in 956, 1303, and 1323 CE that damaged or toppled portions of the structure, shaking even this mighty wonder. You climb the slope toward the base, noting cracks spidering along the limestone, hairline at first, then splitting wider. Masons mutter under their breath, pressing palms to stone as if it might confess how badly it aches. One curses the sea, another curses the gods, and a third curses the donkey that ran away the day before, as though that somehow caused the quake. You can't help but laugh at the absurdity, ancient logic at its finest. Here's the quirky tidbit. One medieval chronicler claimed that after an earthquake, locals believed the lighthouse had groaned audibly, as if it were alive and unwilling to collapse. Imagine standing beside a 100-meter tower and hearing it sigh, "Not today." Goosebumps guaranteed. You walk along the octagonal midsection, hearing ropes creak as workers lash beams against weakened walls. The air smells sharp with tar and dust, grit stinging your nose. Higher up, scaffolding wobbles dangerously, men shouting to steady it with ropes. Their faces are smeared with sweat and lime, eyes darting between sky and stone as if expecting another tremor. Historians still argue whether the lighthouse's partial collapses happened suddenly during these quakes, or whether damage built slowly over decades of strain. Did the tower stagger like a wounded soldier before finally falling, or did sections crumble all at once with the violence of an angry sea? The debate remains as unsettled as the ground beneath your sandals. Another tremor rattles the island, sharper this time. Dust cascades from the seams and you duck instinctively. A mason above yells, "She's strong, but she doesn't like being shaken awake." Nervous laughter ripples through the crew before they return to bracing timbers. You wipe grit from your eyes and marvel at the stubbornness of both stone and men. The harbor beyond continues almost as if nothing happened. Ships sway gently in the swell, merchants argue over crates, cats lounge imperiously on sunlit planks. Life goes on, trusting that the beacon will still flare at night, even if its stones bear scars. The lighthouse is too important to imagine failing. You glance upward, squinting at the crown where flames lick bronze mirrors. The light is steady, though the tower beneath trembles. It feels almost defiant, like a captain keeping calm while the ship groans around him. You smile, reminded that sometimes symbols matter more than structures. You pause at a crack wide enough to slide your hand inside. The stone is cool, damp from salt spray, but still solid. You step back, reassured and uneasy at once. For now, the lighthouse holds. For now, the beacon burns. The gulls circle again, crying sharply, and you wonder if they sense the same fragility you do. The ground shifts beneath you, not with another quake, but with the knowledge that even wonders are mortal. You step away from the scarred stones, the tremors fading into memory, and wander down the shoreline where the city stretches its arms along the sea. Alexandria hums with life, markets shouting, donkeys braying, sails billowing, and yet everyone's eyes keep darting toward the lighthouse. It is still standing, yes, but cracks have a way of planting cracks in the mind as well. You overhear merchants whispering that Pharos is no longer eternal, that perhaps its days are numbered like any mortal king. Neutral voice adds, by the later centuries, the lighthouse was already in decline, its glory dimmed. Earthquakes weakened it, repairs grew costly, and new methods of navigation reduced its once unmatched value. You pause near a fisherman sorting his nets, his hands moving like water, his words bitter. The lighthouse is proud, he mutters, but pride doesn't feed families. Better to mend ships than mend stone. You nod, though you can't resist joking that at least the lighthouse never drops fish guts on your sandals. He smirks, muttering that if it did, maybe tourists would finally pay extra. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some late medieval travelers wrote that locals scavenged pieces of the lighthouse stone to build their own houses and mosques. Imagine taking a block from one of the world's wonders and using it to patch your kitchen wall. Dinner tastes better, you joke aloud, when your oven has a seven-wonder foundation. You walk farther inland, toward the great library's ghostly memory, and hear scholars debating whether Pharos should be rebuilt, replaced, or simply left to crumble. One insists a taller, stronger tower could rise, an upgrade, version 2.0. Another argues that its time has passed, that navigation charts and stars do the job better. Historians still argue whether the final years of the lighthouse saw any real effort at restoration, or whether it was left to decay gracefully, a relic ignored by its own city. You cross a square where children play with hoops, occasionally glancing at the sea to see if the tower still shines. To them, Pharos is simply part of the horizon, a companion too big to vanish. You smile, realizing how often people mistake the permanent for the temporary, and the temporary for the permanent. The air grows hot as the sun climbs, and you imagine the cracked stones baking like loaves in an oven. Dust drifts lazily along the breeze, as if the tower sighs with each gust. You remember the sailor's tale that the lighthouse could groan like a living creature. Perhaps now you believe him a little more. From the far end of the quay, a trader announces he's selling miniature models of the lighthouse carved from seashells. Only slightly cracked, he calls out with a grin. The crowd laughs, though a tinge of melancholy lingers in the sound. When people make souvenirs of something, it usually means they fear losing it. You walk back toward the water, gazing at the tower's fading glory. The flame is still there, mirrors flashing, but the base seems more fragile than before. It is like watching an elder relative sit proudly at the head of the table, still dignified, still commanding, yet you can't help noticing the tremor in their hands. The waves lap steadily, ignoring human worries, and the lighthouse continues its watch. For now. For tonight. But whispers ride the wind, saying one day soon the beacon will dim. You return to the island in a light that feels different, thin, brittle, as if the sun itself worries what it will see. The lighthouse still stands, but the lines around its edges look tired. You step over seaweed-slick stones and pause when the ground gives a soft, unsettling sigh. A gull shrieks, then the earth shivers. It's a quick, mean shake, the kind that drops buckets and turns strong knees to reeds. You grab a chipped block, breathing through the sway, and watch hairline cracks widen like sudden rivers. Neutral voice steadies your footing with a plain fact. Powerful earthquakes in 1303 and 1323 CE damaged the Lighthouse of Alexandria so severely that medieval observers described it as broken, partly collapsed, and later reduced to heaps of masonry. After centuries of service, the wonder had finally become a patient in critical condition. Dust rises in pale curtains. A corner of the octagonal tier slumps, then lets go with a groan that crawls into your bones. The sound is not violent, it is exhausted. Blocks tumble in slow motion to your eyes, thudding in uneven beats that set the bay echoing. You step back, instinctively counting under your breath as though numbers could stitch stones together again. You know they can't. Here's the quirky tidbit. A medieval tale claims a clever foreign spy once convinced a ruler that a magic mirror atop Pharos could reveal the secrets of distant cities, so it should be dismantled for security. The result, according to the story, was less espionage and more expensive regret. It's a dramatic legend with wobbly legs, but it proves an old truth. People love blaming spies for what earthquakes already started. You skirt the fallen corner, picking a path through fresh debris. Carved fragments wink out of dust, bits of cornice, a curve that might have been a column, a bronze nail bent like a tired eyebrow. Masons and fishermen stand side by side, silent. One finally mutters that the towers decided to sit down and take a rest for just a century or two. The gallows humor floats up, fragile but necessary, and then the quiet returns. Historians still argue whether the final collapse came all at once in a catastrophic spill or as a series of slow defeats, sections sagging, stairways yawning open, the crown shedding stone like tired feathers. The reports are scattered. The end result is not. You feel it beneath your feet, certainty in pieces. A second tremor slaps the island. You brace. This time you watch the topmost ring shudder, twist a fraction, and lean, only a breath, but enough to turn faces pale. No one screams. The sound is deeper than that, a collective exhale stretched thin. The crown holds for now, but every breath you take feels like a coin tossed into a well that no longer grants wishes. You move to the shoreline where waves slap stone with bored persistence. A fisherman crouches, running his hand over a fallen block, as if soothing an old horse. He tells you his grandfather rode by this tower at night, eyes wet with gratitude. He asks, who will thank the sea now? You have no answer, so you offer the only thing you can, standing there with him, being quiet. A small crowd gathers. Children kick pebbles, pretending to command the collapse like tiny gods of gravity. A mother shushes them, then smiles, despite herself, when the littlest one salutes the broken tower and says, "Sleep well." Out of the mouths of babes comes the gentlest obituary. Neutral voice adds a final hinge of context. By the later Mamluk period, the remaining stones of Pharos were quarried for new works along the coast. The site would eventually be capped by defensive walls and, later still, a citadel. The beacon's body became a fortress's skeleton, practicality drafted into memory. You walk across a rubble field that didn't exist yesterday. Each step knocks history into dust that floats up and clings to your skin. A bent bronze hinge lies half buried, catching light like a blink. You pocket nothing. The place feels like a tomb, and you choose to leave it undisturbed, the way you lower your voice in a room where someone once sang. A cleric arrives and murmurs a short prayer for travelers at sea. A sailor answers with a whistle he swears brings luck. A mason presses his palm to the stone and promises, to no one in particular, that he will try to prop what can be propped. Even if the tower is beyond rescue, the gestures matter. They are stitches in air, but stitches all the same. You sit on a fallen block and watch the harbor make its unbothered loops, ropes coiled, barrels rolled, cats supervising. Trade adapts, people adapt. The lighthouse, once the most sure thing on the skyline, has joined the list of uncertain categories. You feel a strange tenderness for the wreck, as if the tower were an old teacher who suddenly forgot a lesson and asked you to supply the words. A boy sidles up and asks whether the light will shine tonight. You start to say yes out of habit, then stop. Maybe a smaller beacon on a nearer wall will do, a line of torches along the breakwater, a pilot boat with twice the lanterns. Maybe yes has simply changed shape. You tell him ships will still find their way. He nods, unconvinced but grateful for a sentence he can carry home. The sun slides low and gilds the ruins until they almost look whole again. The trick of light is kind. It stitches outlines where mass has gone. A woman selling figs lays one on a block and pats it like an offering, a sweet, modest coin for the ferryman of stones. You buy 2 more, because grief makes you generous and also because figs are persuasive. As dusk deepens, You imagine the tower at its height, mirrors flaring, fire a steady star, and the vision overlaps with what stands now, a shoulder where a torso once rose, a gesture where a hand once lifted. You realize that memory itself is a kind of lighthouse. It doesn't rebuild the coast, it simply lets the mind come home without wrecking. The breeze turns cool, and with it comes a thought you don't want but keep anyway. Someday, no child will have seen this tower. They will know it only from stories, drawings, and the way older voices soften when they speak its name. Wonders vanish, wonder remains. That is how the world keeps moving. Psst. A final ripple of tremor brushes the island like an old cat's tired paw. Pebbles tick, dust sighs, nothing dramatic, just the earth closing a page. You stand, brush grit from your palms, and look once more at the broken height. It feels less like a failure than a completion. An exclamation point laid gently on its side. Night comes on. Torches kindle along the quay in a humble, many-handed imitation of the lost crown. Boats still rock toward shelter, slower, more careful, guided now by smaller lights and older instincts. You turn away from the island, and the sound that follows you is not collapse, but water. Patient as ever, writing its same one sentence against stone. You stand at the water's edge where new walls rise from the old. Mamluk builders have taken the fallen bones of the lighthouse and refashioned them into a fortress. It is the citadel of Qaitbai, a squat and muscular guardian bristling with battlements where once a flame had danced. You run your hand over the stone, still smelling faintly of salt, and realize you are touching both survival and recycling. History doesn't waste good material. It just edits it. Neutral narration leans in with a plain fact. In 1480 CE, Sultan al-Ashraf Saif al-Din Qaitbai ordered a citadel built on the very foundations of the ruined lighthouse, using much of its stone. The fortress stood as a defense against potential Ottoman attack and later against European fleets. The Pharos, reborn as a military outpost, shifted its role from guide to guard. You squint toward the sea. The walls look stern, like a chess rook carved from patience. Soldiers pace along parapets, their boots tapping rhythms where once a beacon's flame hissed. A gull lands beside you, eyeing your hand as if hoping for bread. You offer none, and it ruffles its feathers in theatrical disappointment. Even gulls, it seems, carry a sense of drama. Here comes the quirky tidbit. Some travelers insisted they still saw magical mirrors hidden in the citadel walls, relics of the old tower's optical tricks. One even claimed the mirrors could set enemy sails on fire if angled right. You almost imagine a soldier fumbling with a reflective slab, accidentally blinding his commander, then pretending it was part of the plan. You walk through an arched gate. The interior is cool, smelling of wood smoke and damp stone. A mason explains with pride that the walls are thick enough to swallow cannon fire. His son traces a finger over blocks with half-erased carvings. He whispers that he can still feel the lighthouse's heartbeat through the fortress's skin. You nod, because in this place, a heartbeat is as real as a blueprint. Historians still argue whether the citadel saved more lives than the lighthouse itself. Did guiding ships safely mean more than guarding a coast from invasion? Both mattered, but measuring them feels like comparing a lullaby to a war drum. Different rhythms for different nights. You climb the stairs inside. Each echo is a conversation between centuries. At the top, the view sprawls. Fishing boats bob like corks, the harbor bends its usual arm, and the sea stretches out with the arrogance of eternity. You imagine a sailor, centuries later, squinting at these walls and thinking, "That fortress looks familiar." He wouldn't be wrong. Beneath the geometry of defense is the ghost of light. Soldiers joke among themselves below. One says if enemies ever break through, they'll just drop figs on their heads from the tower. Another replies they'd need watermelons for that to work. You grin. History may change costumes, but humor rarely misses its cue. A call to prayer rises from the city, drifting over walls that used to echo with waves and flame. The sound threads through the stone, weaving continuity where destruction once stood. You breathe it in, a reminder that even ruins can host new songs. You descend and wander outside, where children chase each other across stones quarried from the lighthouse. One pretends to be a ship, arms spread wide, while another flickers a torch, shouting, "He's the light." Their game has no rules, yet somehow it preserves what once was. Play becomes the archive no earthquake can crack. Neutral voice gives context again. Through later centuries, earthquakes still nudged at Alexandria, but the fortress endured. The lighthouse was gone, yet its footprint remained visible in every cartographer's hand and every sailor's tale. You trail your hand across the seawall, imagining what lies beneath. Chunks of the old tower, carvings eroded to unrecognizable size. Perhaps some fragment still bears the shine of a craftsman's chisel. Perhaps the sea cradles a block like a forgotten toy. You picture divers centuries later, eyes wide in the dim green light, brushing silt away to reveal stone that once touched stars. Standing there, you realize the irony. A monument built to guide ships became raw material for a monument meant to repel them. Yet, both served the same desire, to survive the sea's whims and the world's ambitions. You whisper to the horizon as if it might answer. Do you prefer a hand that beckons or a fist that warns? No reply comes, only gulls crying their sharp vowels. You decide that maybe the world needs both. You drift along the Alexandrian harbor at twilight, where the water shimmers bronze under the lowering sun. The citadel of Kite Bay squats behind you like a stern uncle, while ahead lies the restless sea, still whispering secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. You lean on the worn stone wall, closing your eyes, and imagine the lighthouse whole again. For a heartbeat you almost see it, flame dancing, mirrors gleaming, a titan that refuses to bow. Neutral narration clears its throat. Today, the Lighthouse of Alexandria is known as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, though unlike the pyramids, it has truly vanished. Its place on that famous list has helped preserve its memory, even as its stones were reused and its light extinguished. Fishermen nearby trade stories as they mend their nets. One swears his grandfather's grandfather claimed to see a phantom flame hovering above the citadel on stormy nights. Another insists divers have found a staircase intact on the seafloor, spiraling down into silence like a seashell's secret. You can't help but grin, imagining an underwater realtor trying to sell it as cozy, needs work, ocean views included. Here's a quirky tidbit. In the 20th century, underwater archaeologists really did map colossal blocks scattered across the seabed around Pharos Island. Some divers said they felt like they were walking through a submerged sculpture garden. You picture one archaeologist sighing, "This is incredible," while another complains about soggy sandwiches. You wander farther down the quay, where tourists point at the citadel and wonder aloud whether any trace of the old tower still lingers inside. Historians still argue whether rebuilding the lighthouse as a modern monument would honor its memory or distort it. Some call for a replica that could shine again. Others fear a theme park imitation would cheapen the mystery. A boy runs past you, waving a toy boat on a string, dragging it across the cobblestones as though they were waves. His mother calls after him, laughing, "Careful or you'll wreck your ship on the stones." The joke lands heavier than she realizes, for here, wrecks and stones have been in conversation for millennia. You climb a small rise near the water. From this angle, the horizon tilts upward like a stage curtain lifting. You feel the echo of countless sailors who once relied on the beacon's steady pulse. How many lives were steered home? How many storms endured? And how many prayers rose with every glimpse of light breaking darkness? Neutral narration again. Even after its fall, the image of Pharos influenced lighthouse designs across the Mediterranean and beyond. Its 3-tiered structure, square, octagonal, cylindrical, became a blueprint echoed in later towers. Architects centuries removed still borrowed from its silhouette, as though its shadow refused to vanish. A stray cat curls at your feet, purring like a miniature engine. You joke that maybe the lighthouse reincarnated as this cat, aloof, watchful, but always glowing with faint mystery. The cat yawns in a way that definitely doesn't answer your theory, then slinks away. The air cools, salt brushing your lips. You glance one last time at the fortress, the harbor, the darkening sky. The lighthouse is gone, but not gone. It has been rebuilt in memory, in story, in blueprint, in ghost flame. You realize the paradox. Destruction sometimes becomes the most durable form of survival. And as night slips in, the sea carries its eternal conversation forward, cradling both stone and story. The question remains in the hush of the waves: was the lighthouse's true power in its light or in its memory? You stand at the edge of the harbor as night folds across the water, the air cool and brushed with the smell of salt and tar. The fortress looms, fishermen pack up their baskets, and the stars prick through the velvet sky one by one. You let your gaze wander toward the place where the lighthouse once towered, rising like a stairway for giants. The sea is dark there now, but your imagination refuses the emptiness. You still see the flame leap, mirrors flashing, as though it were only hidden behind the veil of time. Neutral narration explains. The Lighthouse of Alexandria endured for centuries as the tallest man-made structure on Earth, guiding countless sailors to safety. Yet, earthquakes between the 10th and 14th centuries eventually brought it down. By the time the citadel of Kite Bay was built in the 15th century, most of the lighthouse had already crumbled into the sea. Still, fragments live on. Some lie beneath the waves, colossal stones scattered like the toys of forgotten titans. Others rest in the walls of mosques, fortresses, and homes across Alexandria. The lighthouse dissolved into the city it once protected, its body becoming part of the people's daily lives. Imagine boiling soup in a kitchen reinforced with blocks that once held up one of the seven wonders. Talk about dinner with a side of world heritage. You smile at the thought because that's what humans do, carry the past forward, often without realizing it. Sailors still tell tales of ghostly flames above Pharos, children still draw towers in the margins of notebooks, and travelers still come here searching not for stone but for story. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some writers in the Middle Ages claimed the lighthouse's mirrors were so powerful they could set enemy ships ablaze by focusing sunlight, like a giant magnifying glass. Modern science doubts that, but it's a fun mental image. You chuckle, picturing sailors nervously applying extra sunscreen just in case. Historians still argue whether the lighthouse truly deserves its title as the greatest beacon ever built, or whether its legend has outgrown its reality. But as you stand here, feeling the hush of the sea and the pull of history, it hardly matters. Sometimes legends do the guiding even better than light. The stars shimmer brighter, and the harbor grows quiet except for the steady lap of waves. The lighthouse is gone, yet in this stillness you sense its endurance, not in stone, not in flame, but in memory, carried across centuries like a lantern that never goes out. And now, let the pace slow, as if the tide itself has grown drowsy. The harbor empties, the voices of merchants and sailors fading into the hush of night. You close your eyes and picture the flame of the lighthouse, not fierce, not blinding, but soft and steady, glowing against the darkness like a lantern left in a window to welcome you home. The sea breathes beneath you, its rhythm a lullaby older than kingdoms. Each wave carries away the noise of the day, and with it, the weight of worries you no longer need to hold. The stone walls around you blur into shadows, the citadel becomes gentle outlines, and the stars drift a little closer, as if leaning in to listen to your quiet heartbeat. Imagine the lighthouse rebuilt within your own mind, tier upon tier, steady and calm. Its flame doesn't warn of danger anymore, it simply keeps you company, guiding your thoughts into gentler waters. There's no rush here, no storm to fear, only the hush of the present moment, wide and still. Let your breathing match the tide. Inhale like the sea filling, exhale like the sea retreating. With each breath, the light within grows softer, warmer, safer. The day has ended, the night has opened its arms, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. So drift now, carried by waves older than memory, guided by a light that never truly went out. Sleep comes like a harbor, calm and embracing. The end. Sweet dreams.